Questions. Apart from 6 oral questions for this meeting, I've permitted Dr. KWOK Ka-ki to ask an urgent question under Rule 24.4 of the Rules of Procedure. Dr. KWOK. Mr. President, 2 successive fatal cases involving 2 children infected by serotype 3 Streptococcus pneumoniae last week have aroused public concern. After a meeting held on the 25th November, the Scientific Committee on Vaccine Preventable Diseases and its working group on pneumococcal vaccination of the Center for Health Protection of the Department of Health considered that a booster dose of 13-valent pneumococcal conjugate vaccine among children under 5 years old who had received PCV7 or PCV10 was not required at this point in time. However, the government announced concurrently that it decided to subsidize through the vaccination subsidy scheme 1 booster dose each for children aged 2 to under 5 years old who had not previously received PCV13. And the details of the program will be announced later. Some parents have said that these 2 pieces of news, which contain contrasting information concerning the need or otherwise for children to receive vaccination, have sent out confusing messages which is not conducive to stabilizing the epidemic and will also pose a serious threat to the health of children. In this connection, government informed this Council whether it will immediately publish clear guidelines to assist parents in deciding whether the children need to receive pneumococcal vaccination, if they will, of the content of the guidelines, if not reasons for that. B, whether it has put in place any immediate measures to ensure an adequate supply of vaccines by pharmaceutical manufacturers, if it has, of details, if not reasons for that. And C, when the booster dose program will be implemented the soonest, whether the government has put in place emergency measures to cope with an outbreak of invasive pneumococcal epidemic prior to implementation, if it has details including circumstances under which the government will implement such measures, if not, how the government can ensure that the epidemic will be put under control. Secretary for Food and Environment and Food. Secretary for Healthcare and Food. My reply to Dr. KWOK's question is as follows. ANC, the Scientific Committee, and the Working Group of the Center for Health Protection of the Health Department convened a joint meeting in the afternoon of 25th November to follow up on the 2 recent fatal cases of children infected with invasive pneumococcal disease. The Scientific Committee and the Working Group have closely examined global and local IPD situation, in particular the situation caused by serotype 3 Streptococcus pneumoniae. Based on information currently available, the Joint Committee considered that a booster dose of 13-valent pneumococcal conjugate vaccine, PCV13, is not required at this point in time for children under 5 years old who had received 7-valent or 10-valent PCV. Taking into account the Scientific Committee's view together with concerns across the community and parents, and noting the Scientific Committee's view, the government and other expert views, the government has decided to subsidize 1 booster dose through vaccination subsidy scheme for children aged 2 to under 5 years old who have never received PCV13. The government aims to launch in December this year a PCV13 vaccination subsidy scheme under which private doctors will provide a booster vaccine to children aged 2 to under 5 years old who have never received PCV13. Implementation details of the subsidy scheme will be announced in due course. In parallel, the government will step up dissemination of related information to the public, including information on the prevention of IPD and the effectiveness of PCV13, etc., to keep the public well informed. All along, the CHP has been maintaining a notification and surveillance mechanism and devising infectious disease prevention infection control strategies in accordance with information and data gathered. The government remains vigilant and monitors the latest development of infectious diseases and will convene relevant meetings when necessary to make timely reviews and adjustments to surveillance mechanisms and prevention and control strategies to protect public health. The government has been implementing the following measures. Surveillance of pneumococcus. Although currently pneumococcus disease is not statutory notifiable disease, the DFH has set a laboratory surveillance mechanism for comprehensive surveillance of local trends of IPD and serotype replacement about antibiotic resistance. It covers all the microbiological laboratories in public and private hospitals in Hong Kong and therefore can provide comprehensive and detailed epidemiological data. Control of outbreak. If there is any notice of suspect of outbreak, the institutions have to report to the CHP. Upon receipt of notification, CHP will contact schools and institutions when necessary, conduct epidemiological investigation, inspection, medical surveillance, give professional advice, so on and so forth. The CHP has, on publicity and risk communication, the CHP has all along been monitoring the local epidemiological data on IPD. It has issued a letter to all doctors in Hong Kong to update them on the local situation of IPD and advice on medication in order to remind them to stay alert of IPD and minimize the impact of disease. On free and subsidized vaccination programs, parents should continue to have their newborn children vaccinated in accordance with the recommendations under the childhood immunization program. The elderly aged 65 or above who have never received a pneumococcal vaccination should receive 1 dose of the pneumococcal vaccine and can receive it for free or with a subsidy under the government vaccination program of the Elderly Vaccination Subsidy Scheme. Moreover, as pneumococcal infection followed by influenza may lead to more severe illnesses, children aged 6 months and above should receive seasonal influenza vaccination unless there is contraindication. As for public education, the public should maintain good personal and environmental hygiene practices. The government will strengthen its messages to the public on maintaining personal and environmental hygiene through a variety of means, including websites and health education materials. B. According to information provided by the pharmaceutical company, there is sufficient stock of PCV-13 vaccine in Hong Kong, and more vaccines will be sent to Hong Kong next month. The Hong Kong government is liaising with the vaccine supplier to ensure that there are sufficient vaccines to meet local needs. Dr. KK Kwok, I appreciate the presence of the Policy Secretary, but he has not answered our question. My question is, how can parents know what sort of message is correct? I know that the decision by the administration is to provide vaccination to children. That is not in line with the advice of the scientific committee. I agree with the administration, but the message obtained is very different. This morning, a parent told me that Dr. Kwok, the experts said that the vaccine will only be effective within 6 to 12 months. My son had vaccination more than 12 months ago, and the view of the experts was different from that of the administration. In 2011 in Taiwan, there was a booster dose. That was a national policy, and many advanced countries did provide a booster dose. And most important of all, when will the vaccines be available for the parents? The parents are very anxious. You say that you will have a program in December. When will the vaccination begin? The Secretary. On this matter, it is an obvious example in respect of the effectiveness of different vaccines of different valency, in particular PCV-13. As for those who have received PCV-7 and PCV-10 vaccination, what is the additional protection by receiving PCV-13? There is no consensus among local experts. That is very clear, Dr. Kwok. This is not our subjective wish. This is this is a fact. Experts have different opinions. An administrative decision cannot standardize these views. with free information. Each expert is free to give his or her view through the media. The administration has established an effective mechanism. We have the committees and working groups. We have selected experts who have a strong representative standing. They represent mainstream views. There is no adequate evidence in medical literature to support the booster dose of PCV13. And therefore, they made such a piece of advice to the administration. The administration cannot contradict such views, but other experts through other media have given a different view. And I'm concerned that citizens are receiving different messages. In balancing the pros and cons, the administration has made a decision, an administrative decision. We work through this vaccination program to provide a booster dose of PCV13 to those age 2 to under 5 years old and who had received PCV7 and PCV10. Now, after this announcement, there are different views given by experts through the media. Let me stress, however different the views are, I believe there is one point that can be established, and that is our local parents do not have to seek immediate vaccination for the booster dose. Many experts have pointed out that maintaining good personal and environmental hygiene practices is most important. After receiving vaccination, there is no 100% protection. Personal and environmental hygiene is most important. It takes time to arrange for the vaccination program, but we are doing our best. I said earlier, according to the CHP, the program may have to wait for 5 to 6 weeks before launching. But now, after about 2 weeks, say in December, we'll be able to launch the program. And in the coming 2 or 3 days, the CHP will be able to coordinate various parties, and it will announce the details of the vaccination program. I believe our colleagues have done their level best. Amidst different views, we have tried to make a balanced decision. We respect the views given by the scientific committee and the working group. We therefore have not included it in our regulation vaccination program. But we know that citizens are receiving different views and different messages. And in fact, I don't want to see the continuous appearance of different views. But let me stress that different experts have different professional views, and we have to respect the freedom of expression of these experts. If need be, we may need to consult some certain authorities, say, for example, the Academy of Medicine, the relevant faculties under the School of Medicine or Academy of Medicine, the different schools under the Academy of Medicine. But even experts within these faculties or schools may not agree with each other in the short term. Dr. Kwok, I want to ask a short question. A 3-year-old is standing in front of you. The parent asks you, Dr. Kwok, doctor, should he receive an injection? Well, I think the Secretary has answered your question, Dr. Kwok. Before you ask a supplementary question, I'd like to remind you that a meeting has been arranged by the healthcare panel to discuss this matter. Any question can be reserved for that meeting. You can exchange views with the administration or seek further information through that meeting. And there is no need to ask further questions under this urgent question arrangement. Now, with regard to the vaccination program, many clinics work together with ward offices of counselors to provide vaccination to residents. Now, some doctors in private practice say that if the government make orders for vaccines, then the private clinics will get the vaccines later. Is it possible for the private clinics to give order, to place order for the vaccines, and then they can talk to the administration for the subsidy? That will enhance efficiency. Will the administration consider this? The Secretary, with regard to Ms. Leung's question, what I heard from the private practitioners, there are different views. On one hand, some private practitioners are of the view that it is better for them to order vaccines from the pharmaceutical company directly. That will be more flexible. But other private practitioners say that they have difficulties in placing order for the vaccine. And the administration every year has a regular order placement program for its own vaccination programs. Therefore, it is better for us to place the order. First, it is public money. The vaccine is subsidized by the administration. In placing order for the vaccine and also in the logistics of supply of vaccine, through our regular ordering arrangement, the costs will be cheaper. When individual doctors order for the vaccine, we cannot ensure that they can obtain the vaccine effectively from the pharmaceutical company. And we have to consider that. And finally, I hope you can give some time to the CHP. The CHP is liaising with various parties, including the suppliers, the HA, and all parties who will participate in the vaccination program, or in this booster dose vaccination program. And we will announce the details in due course. Ms. Priscilla Leung, it's the same question. Ms. Leung, please sit down. I think the Secretary has already answered your question. Ms. Leung, please sit down. I think the question has already answered your question. If you are not happy with his question, you should pursue the answers through other channels. And 8 members are waiting. Dr. Leung Ka-lau. Yes, the President has all ears. He got wind of our decision just half an hour ago. Now, the Secretary, would you provide more information to provide relief to the parents? According to international studies, what is the infection rate and fatality rate for those who have not received any pneumococcal injection? for those who have received PCV7 and also for PCV10, how much is the risk reduced and how much the risk will be further reduced by receiving PCV13. The Secretary says that there is no need to hurry to receive vaccination. But if there is a delay by 1 week, it is not important. Then what about delay by 2 weeks or 3 weeks? What is the accumulated risk? The Secretary for Food and Health. Mr. President, earlier on, I have stated very clearly that in international medical literature, the data available are not adequate for local experts to come to a consensus as to whether the protection rate is adequate so as to warrant all those who have received PCV7 and PCV10 will have to receive PCV13. I therefore do not believe that there is any authoritative source that can enable me to answer Mr. Leung's detailed question. Different experts looking at different medical literature may come up with different numbers. But apart from looking at the numbers, when one reads medical literature, one also has to look at the study design and other details. Different experts looking at the same report may come to different conclusions. That is very clear in the medical sector. The only thing I can reply to Dr. Leung is this. This is what we can do. According to the CHP, for those below 5-year-old, for those who have been infected with serotype 3 Streptococcus pneumoniae, 6 in 2010, 3 in 2011, 2012, 4 cases, 2013, as at 22nd of November, 7 cases. Dr. Leung, I asked for data, not for opinion. I know that different people have different opinions. I asked for data. Mr. Leung, I think it's more appropriate for you to ask for data at the healthcare panel meeting. Dr. Joseph Lee. Speaker is not coming through. To be vaccinated or not to be. I think the administration has gone against its established practice. The decision should be evidence-based. Your experts say there is no need, but the community sees differently, and you decide administratively that it will be funded by public money. Now, this booster program is not a regular program. Will this not cause even greater confusion? You have given people an impression that the administration is in a confusion. It is an administrative decision, but we think it is a political decision. And this political decision has caused people to be really confused. And if the problem continues to exist, will you turn it into a regular booster program or not? Mr. President, Dr. Lee has asked a very important question. When it is in respect of professional matters, the administration sets up advisory committees, consultative committees, experts committees. And in setting up such committees, the administration tries to make sure that relevant professional interests or professional sectors are represented. We, of course, respect the views of the experts. of these advisory or consultative or expert committees. Now, the present case is not the last, and it is not the first example. Now, apart from expert advice, we also have to consider other factors. In this case, our experts have clearly pointed out that their views are based on information and medical literature available locally and international community. Obviously, with regard to this case, there is no consensus in Hong Kong or in the international community. You have to be prepared psychologically for this scenario. Medical knowledge comes from many studies, researchers, and many different experience. And we will not have, we always don't have adequate information to make a decision. But anyways, we have to make a decision. Now, these experts have pointed out the constraints of their views. And they have also said that they do not consider other factors. Say, for example, citizens are receiving contrary views. Citizens feel helpless. These matters will not be accepted by experts. The administration has to consider these matters, and that's why we have to make an administrative decision. Mr. Lee, what part of the question is not answered? Well, in the future, if similar situation occurs next year, then will the administration adopt the same approach? I have not answered the question directly, but I have spelled out the principle, and I believe I have spelled out the principle very clearly. With regard to similar situations, I may not be able to rule them out. It occurred in the past, and it may occur in the future. Every time, having considered and having given due respect to the views of the experts, there are other social factors we have to take into account. But what is the final decision? I cannot explain that to Mr. Lee because this is a hypothetical question. Every time there are different circumstances, then I will make a decision according to the circumstances which I believe that is most appropriate to the community, and that is the responsibility of the government. Mr. Andrew Leung, the parents are very anxious, and the administration makes a political decision and provide the subsidy to the vaccination program. But experts' views are divided. Some say the vaccination can last for 12 months. Overseas information says 2 to 5 years. I want to ask the administration, with PCV13 injection, will there be other side effects? Say, if a 2 to 5 year-old asks the secretary, will you say he should receive the injection or not? I have to admit that I am not an expert in epidemiology. I am not able to list all the side effects. But there are two types generally. Overall side effects, number one, and number two, special side effects. I have not heard any special side effects arising from this vaccine. But I dare not say I know everything. On the whole, there are general side effects. Say, for example, upon vaccination, there may be inflammation on the spot or swollen lump at the spot, and more serious infection may be rash on the skin or even more serious side effects. But on the whole, as for this vaccine, the experts have not expressed any serious side effects about this vaccine. The debate is not on the serious side effect or otherwise. It's about the effectiveness of the vaccine, which there is no conclusion. I want to tell the public clearly, the experts do not advise for vaccination, but or do not advise the need for vaccination. But the administration looks at the concern of the public, and if they want a little bit of extra protection, the administration is willing to finance that. Many members have expressed their concerns, and we have spent nearly 30 minutes, and members can only follow up on other occasions.
多謝主席。喺本月6日嘅立法會會議上高，本會議員根據立法會權力及特權條例動議議案，授權本會事務委員會命令政府提交審批本地免費電視節目服務牌照申請嘅相關文件，下稱以特權法索取文件。有2名本會嘅議員透露，喺該會議之前，中央人民政府駐香港特別行政區聯絡辦事處下稱中聯辦嘅官員係曾經接觸佢哋，並與佢哋討論該議題。其後有一名行政會議下稱行會嘅成員喺回應中聯辦此舉屬干預香港內部事務嘅批評時，佢表示以特權法案索取文件係衝擊行會保密制，而呢個涉及憲制嘅問題，因此中聯辦有責任去維護基本法同埋一個國家兩種制度嘅方針。就此，政府可否告知本會：一、鑑於基本法第22條訂明，中央人民政府所屬各部門、各省、自治區、直轄市均不得干預香港特別行政區根據本法自行管理嘅事務。當局有否制定機制同埋程序處理出現該等干預香港自行管理事務嘅情況？若有，詳情為何？若否，原因為何？二、有否評估以
To deal with the situations where there is interference in the affairs which Hong Kong ministers on its own, if they have of the details, if not, the reasons for that. B, whether it has assessed if the production of documents under the PMP ordinance is an affair which the Hong Kong SAR administers on its own as stipulated in Article 22 of the Basic Law. If the assessment outcome is in the affirmative, whether it has assessed if the officials of the liaison office have contravened the aforesaid article of the Basic Law by discussing the matter with members of this council. If the assessment outcome is in the affirmative, whether the authorities have relayed to the liaison office that its officials have contravened the Basic Law by expressing views on this matter, if they have not, of the reason for that. And C, whether the aforesaid views of the EXCO member reflect the views of EXCO, if so, the justifications for the EXCO to hold such views. Secretary for Constitutional and Mainland Affairs. President, regarding the member's question, after consulting relevant bureau and departments, I will represent the administration to give a consolidated reply as follows. According to Article 12 of the Basic Law, the Hong Kong SAR shall be a local administrative region of the People's Republic of China, which shall enjoy a high degree of autonomy and come directly under the Central People's Government, CPG. According to Article 2 of the Basic Law, the National People's Congress, NPC, authorizes the SAR to exercise a high degree of autonomy and enjoy executive, legislative, and independent judicial power, including that of final adjudication, in accordance with the provisions of the Basic Law. According to Article 16 of the Basic Law, the SAR shall be vested with executive power. It shall on its own conduct the administrative affairs of the region in accordance with the relevant provisions of the Basic Law. Since the establishment of the SAR, the central authorities have been acting in strict accordance with the fundamental principles and policies of one country, two systems, Hong Kong people administering Hong Kong, and a high degree of autonomy, as well as the provisions of the Basic Law BL to support the Chief Executive and the SAR government administering Hong Kong in accordance with the law. On the 18th of March 2013, the Premier of the State Council, Li Keqiang, met with the CE of the SAR. He stated that the new leadership of the CPG was committed to thoroughly implementing the one country, two systems principle and would act in strict accordance with BL and fully support the CE and SAR government in administering Hong Kong in accordance with law. Since the reunification, Hong Kong government has been administering the affairs of Hong Kong in strict accordance with the BL and the one country, two systems principle. Regarding the system of confidentiality of the EXCO, the CS4A has already replied to members' question in the LegCo meeting on the 13th of November this year. CS has emphasized that EXCO is an organ with constitutional status that assists the CE in policy making. In order to perform its function in a fully competent manner, EXCO has been adhering to the principle of confidentiality over the years to ensure that EXCO members can freely speak and honestly without any pressure when giving advice to the CE. It also enables the CE to listen to different views when assessing the pros and cons of policies so that the policies eventually formulated will be more comprehensive. The principle of confidentiality is also the basis on which the integrity of the EXCO system relies. Protecting the integrity of the EXCO system is a matter of significant public interest. In line with principles of confidentiality, the government will not disclose the content of the agendas and discussions of EXCO, but the government will explain the decisions made and the relevant considerations by means of press releases and LegCo briefs. Our reply to the three parts of the question is as follows. A. Since the reunification, the CPG, the offices set up by the CPG in the SAR and the SAR government have all along been adhering strictly to the one country, two systems principle, the provisions of the BL, and abiding by their own areas of responsibility in accordance with the law. The legal basis relevant to the LegCo's request for production of documents is stipulated clearly in the relevant provisions under the BL and the Legislative Council PNP Ordinance. 1. According to Article 73 of the Basic Law, when exercising the powers and functions stated in Article 73 (1) to bracket 7 of the BL, the LegCo may summon the persons concerned to testify or give evidence. 2. According to Section 9 (1) of the LegCo PNP Ordinance, the LegCo or our standing committee thereof may, subject to Sections 13 and 14, order any person to attend before the LegCo or before such committee, and to give evidence or to produce any paper, book, record, or document in the possession or under the control of such person. 3. On the other hand, Article 48 (11) of the BL provides that one of the powers and the functions of the CE is to decide, in the light of security and vital public interests, whether government officials or other personnel in charge of government affairs should testify or give evidence before the LegCo or its committees. Besides, any person may refuse to answer any question or produce any paper according to Section 13 of the LegCo PNP Ordinance and enjoy the privileges of witness according to Section 14 of the Ordinance. Since the reunification, the government has been acting in strict accordance with the law and in handling the requests made by the LegCo to produce documents under the LegCo PNP Ordinance. The liaison office of the CPG is an organization authorized by the CPG and performs functions in accordance to the authority conferred by the CPG, including liaising with the Office of the Commissioner of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the People's Republic of China in the Hong Kong SAR and the Hong Kong garrison of the Chinese People's Liberation Army, promoting general exchange and cooperation between Hong Kong and the mainland, liaising with various sectors of the community of Hong Kong to enhance exchanges between the mainland and Hong Kong and reflecting the views of Hong Kong residents on the mainland. Regarding the domestic free TV program service license applications mentioned, we noticed that there are media reports on the LegCo members mentioning that they were approached by liaison office officials. According to the relevant media reports, the concerned members stated that no one exerted any pressure on them. Moreover, we noticed that the concerned members had different voting inclinations on the concerned motion at the LegCo. C. I have quoted in Part 2 of the reply the legal basis relevant to the LegCo's request for production of documents under the LegCo PNP Ordinance. As regards the views expressed by an individual EXCO member on public occasions, so long as the principles of confidentiality system and collective responsibility system of the EXCO are not violated, EXCO members, like any other citizen, have the same right of expressing personal opinions. We will not comment on the personal views expressed by individual EXCO members. Thank you. Mr. Albert HO. Mr. President, in the past, when there were important motions to be voted on, and when it's a close call, the liaison office would ask our legislators for a discussion. But in fact, it is to exert pressure. At the end of 2011, in relation to the West Kowloon Cultural District competition, we were going to vote on a motion on whether to set up a select committee to investigate into whether CY Leung had concealed anything. The liaison office approached certain members to ask them for a talk. And on this occasion, well, when in the LegCo, whenever we are trying to decide whether to select a select committee for investigation, whether it is for the free TV or any other issues, it is under Article 22. It is an affair to be administered by the Hong Kong SAR. For CPG officials to approach and liaise legislators before the voting of the motion, including Mr. Paul there. Well, the intention is to change their voting inclination. Isn't that an interference of our internal affairs? And as a result, Mr. Porter changed his voting inclination. So obviously, it is an interference of our internal affairs. How are you going to follow it up? Secretary. First of all, I think Mr. Albert Ho's question was on the free-to-air TV license. Well, Mr. Lee is there. I think he will get a clearer picture if he asks Dr. Lee direct. Whether it is a legislature or the executive, we act in accordance with the basic law and the laws of Hong Kong. On the political level, all 70 members of this council are elected. They are accountable to their constituents. I believe that at the time of voting, legislators will exercise their independent judgment and will be held accountable to their constituents and make the right decision. In my main reply, I have mentioned that the relevant legislators mentioned that no one exerted pressure on them. And I'd like to add that under the relevant legislation, that is Section 19 of the LCPMP ordinance, that is, if one use coercion or threat to influence the voting inclination of a member on an impending motion, has contravened the law. And if there is any contravention, the person committing the offense will be held responsible, and that is so stated in the law. The Secretary did not answer me directly. The investigation of the free TV license matter, is it under the Article 22 of the Basic Law? That is, it is going to be an internal affairs to be administered by Hong Kong. I believe that in relation to the TV license matter, we have, just like before, acted in accordance with the relevant rules, regulations, and legislation. Ms. Claudia Mo. The liaison office interference of Hong Kong's internal affairs. I'm not going to talk about the consequence. I'm talking about the purpose and the process. I hit you. I did not injure you, but it doesn't mean that my strike on you is not wrong. Well, the Hong Kong SAR, the administration, in effect allows or condones the liaison office to interfere with into our affairs. Well, I believe that the liaison office officials have had a luncheon with the LegCo and had luncheons with legislators, and if the LegCo is of the view that it is only a normal course of business to have luncheon with the liaison office, I believe that it is not interference when the liaison office conducts a regular exchange with legislators. Ms. Mo. Well, he likens the luncheon arranged by you with an interference. I think it is an insult to you. Ms. Mo, we have mentioned a number of times that this is not a debate. If you're not happy or disagrees with the official's question, you may pursue it on another occasion or a different platform. Mr. Ma Fung-kwok. In relation to the PNP ordinance motion, to the understanding of a lot of members, they think that it should not have been vetoed. But the motion was vetoed. And this should not get in the way of transparency, of accountability of the administration. In their reply, they say that the decisions made and the relevant considerations taken on board by the EXCO will be released by means of press releases and legible briefs. In relation to the considerations, what are included and what not, how detailed is it? If there are strong questions from the public, how will the administration elaborate further to dispel concerns of the public? Secretary. As I say in the main reply, the established practice for the EXCO before and after the reunification is a collective responsibility. And I have answered in my reply that when a policy decision is made by the EXCO, the decision and the relevant considerations will be disclosed by means of press releases and legible briefs. Because of the system of confidentiality, we have to strike a balance in the treatment of information and documents. As Mr. Ma said, in the discussion of the EXCO, sometimes certain issues or documents involves personal information or commercial sensitive information. We believe that these will have to be kept confidential. When the executive release information of at the EXCO in legible briefs or press releases, the relevant considerations, say for example, impact on human rights, policy implications, are disclosed to members. In relation to the free TV license, Mr. So, the Secretary, has already given a detailed account, and I have nothing to add. Mr. Gary Fan, the Secretary has emphasized that it is done in strict accordance with the BL and the Hong Kong laws. Last year, in the national education saga, Mr. Hao Te-chuan openly made certain comments, and the former Secretary for Education, Michael Soon, before he left, indicated to the media that liaison office officials gave him some comments on national education. So, in the instance I mentioned, has it contravened Article 136 of the Basic Law, and that is in relation to education. The SAR is responsible for development and improvement of education. Sorry, Mr. Fan, I think your question has digressed. It's too far away from the oral question, so I asked you to consider asking the question on another occasion. Mr. Andrew Leung. Well, there is an article written by the liaison office, and there are questions and answers given about the relationship between the liaison office in Hong Kong and the appointment of officials. and the power to monitor of the legislature and the executive by the liaison office. Well, the liaison office, is it the case that the participation of the liaison office has increased? And how is it related to the question? What is the second paragraph? That is the liaison office work. So, is it the case that the liaison office has tightened its role over the Hong Kong SAR, and has it been more involved than before? I believe Mr. Leung asked Mr. Jiang Xiaoming, the current director of the liaison office. Prior to taking up the post, he wrote an article and touches on three questions of the power to be exercised by the liaison of by the CPG over Hong Kong. Let me answer it this way. In my main reply, you have found the answer, the information in relation to the role of the liaison office. And I've also mentioned that in performing its duty, the liaison office will have to strictly abide by the one country, two system, Hong Kong people administering Hong Kong, and a high degree of autonomy, as well as the basic law. Before Mr. Jiang took office of the director of the liaison office, he wrote certain articles. I'm afraid I cannot give an account of every single article written by mainland officials. And in relation to the three questions, the three powers of the CPG, I can give a general answer. First, if I remember it correctly, is in relation to the report of the chief executive under Article 43 of the Basic Law. The chief executive is accountable to the CPG, and every year this chief executive will have to report his work to the CPG at the end of the year, and there is a high degree of transparency and is widely covered by the media. And in relation to appointment of principal officials, under Article 48 of the Basic Law, the appointment of principal officials is done by the CPG and the State Council. And the views of the Chief Executive will be taken into account. The State Council will make an order of appointment, and that will be announced. There is transparency. Number 3, about the legislature. The legislation endorsed by the legislature, they will have to be reported and recorded by the CPG. As far as I know, since the reunification, there are about over 560 pieces of legislation for such record. None of them has been returned to the SAR for revetting. So in relation to the three questions, it's done in accordance with established practice and strict accordance of the basic law. Thank you. We have spent close to 23 minutes on this question.
Second question, Dr. Fernando Jiang. Thank you, President. Recently, there have been a few incidents in which students were bullied, beaten up, and indecently assaulted by teaching staff, and more than one school was involved. According to the Code for the Education Profession of Hong Kong, a member of the members of the education profession should, in the course of their teaching, have concern for the students' safety, seek to establish confidence and trust based on mutual respect, and avoid making the students feel embarrassed or ashamed. In addition, according to the guidelines of the Education Bureau regarding the safety of students, the school should provide a safe learning environment for students to protect their physical and mental health and safety under Section 62F of the Code of 8 for special schools and Section 57F of the Code of 8 for secondary schools and primary schools, the school management committee or the SMC may suspend a teacher from his duties if he's involved in criminal proceedings of a serious nature or if he's under investigation for serious misconduct, and it would be against the interest of the school for him to continue to teach in the classroom. However, such provisions do not require the school to consider the interests of students, and is the SMC rather than the EDB which will be responsible for enforcing such provisions. SMC may therefore decide that the teacher concerned be allowed to continue teaching and there is no need to suspend his duties. On the other hand, the monitoring of teachers' professional conduct is currently under the purview of the Council on Professional Conduct in Education, or the CPC, under the EDB. But then the CPC has no real power and will only advise the Permanent Secretary for Education on cases of misconduct involving educators. In this connection, will the government inform this Council A of the existing procedures and guidelines for schools to handle incidents in which teachers and other staff members are suspected of bullying students, and the respective power and responsibilities of EDB, SMCs, and school principals in such incidents, whether the administration will amend the legislation to stipulate that if a teacher is involved in a serious incident of bullying and suspected of having committed a criminal offense, then the EDB may, in the interest of students, directly order the school concerned to suspend the teachers concerned from his duties if it will, of the timetable and details, if not the reasons for that, and B, whether the authorities will make reference to the mechanisms for regulating the conduct of professionals such as social workers, lawyers, doctors and nurses, and set up an independent organization to regulate the professional conduct of teachers in place of the current arrangements, if they will, of the timetable and details, if not the reasons for that, and C, of the number of complaints received by the EDB in the past 10 years about teachers allegedly bullying students, and among them the number of cases substantiated and the penalties imposed on the teachers concerned. Secretary for Education. President, my reply to Dr. Fernando Jiang's question is as follows. Part A. School is a place where students learn and grow. The Education Bureau will absolutely not tolerate any act of teaching staff that impairs the physical or psychological health or safety of students. Schools are also required to take positive measures to prevent this kind of incidents. The Codes of Aid and the Code of Aid for Special Schools are formulated under the framework of the Education Ordinance. The Education Ordinance provides that the management committee of a school shall be responsible for ensuring that the school is managed satisfactorily and education is promoted in a proper manner. The principal of a school shall, subject to the directions of the management committee, be responsible for the teaching and discipline of the school, and for such purposes shall have authority over the teaching staff and pupils of the school. In order to create a caring school environment and safeguard the interests of students, the EDB has compiled the School Administration Guide and would regularly issue circulars to provide schools with clear guidelines on student affairs, including discipline, student behavior, homeschool cooperation, and the handling of bullying in school and suspected child abuse cases. At the implementation level, the EDB has required schools to formulate and implement strategies to ensure the safety of students at school. In the case of suspected student abuse cases, the schools will have to follow the procedural guide for handling child abuse cases issued by the Social Welfare Department and consult the SWD or the Child Abuse Investigation Team of the police force for appropriate actions. If the case involves criminal elements, then the school should report to the police. And if it's a case involving possible misconduct of the teaching staff, then the school management committee or incorporated management committee as the employer may, depending on the circumstances of the incident, take disciplinary actions as appropriate against the teaching staff concerned in accordance with the requirements of the Codes of Aid and Employment Ordinance. For example, they may issue a verbal or written warning, withhold the annual increment, suspend the teacher from normal duties, or even dismiss him or dismiss summarily. As the interest of students is always at the heart of the daily operation of a school, it is natural that the interest of students should be the key consideration when the school management determines what types of disciplinary action is to be taken against the teaching staff who has committed misconduct. The EDB will decide whether or not to initiate direct investigation in the light of the nature and seriousness of the incident. If the investigation finds out that the teacher concerned has violated the education ordinance or other pieces of legislation, then the EDB will refer the case to the police for follow-up action. Depending on the circumstances of each case, the EPD may issue written recommendations to the SMC or IMC concerned and require the school management to submit a follow-up report on the implementation of the evaluation and the improvement measures recommended by the EDB and to review the relevant disciplinary actions. If necessary, the Permanent Secretary for Education may, in accordance with Section 41 of the Education Ordinance, directly appoint any person he or she thinks fit to be managers of a school to assist the school in the effective implementation of the EDB's recommendation and further support the school management in carrying out its monitoring and administration duties or functions. In addition, upon the conclusion of the investigation, the EDB will also take appropriate follow-up actions against the teacher concerned. For instance, it may issue a warning or advisory letter to the teacher concerned or even consider cancellation of his registration as a teacher. The existing education ordinance and education regulations have stipulated the respective authority of the EDB, the management committee of the schools, and also the school principals. We have no plan to amend the relevant provisions. Part B, the proposal of establishing an independent organization for regulating the professional conduct of teachers will have far-reaching implications for the sector. It is necessary for the sector to have a thorough grasp of the details regarding its functions, roles, composition, mode of operation, and operating expenses, etc., and indicate its full endorsement and support as well. The role and functions of the proposed organization should also fit in the education landscape in Hong Kong. The administration is not in a position to set any timetable before the sector has reached a consensus on the matter. Part C, since the current classification of complaints is different from the past, with regard to the suspected or alleged bullying of the students by this teacher, we can only figure out the situation on the past 4 years. According to the available records, a total of 37 complaints were received against aided schools involving teachers bullying students in the past 4 years, of which 20 were unsubstantiated, 11 partially substantiated, 3 substantiated, and 3 are pending. For the substantiated complaint cases, apart from the disciplinary actions against the teachers taken by the SMCs and the IMCs concerned, the EDB will also take appropriate follow-up actions, including issuing a warning or advisory letter to the teachers concerned in the light of the nature and seriousness of the cases. Thank you. Dr. Fernando Jiang. President, I believe that overwhelming majority of the teachers and the schools are working very, very hard to teach our students, and they would always take their students' interests as their first and foremost consideration. But then we have also dealt with some special situations. As I've said in my question, a teacher has been suspected of having abused his students, and that was also in accordance with the investigation undertaken by the Education Bureau and has been found to be substantiated, resulting in mental and physical injury of the students. And such cases have also been referred to the police for criminal investigation. And yet, under those circumstances, the teachers concerned were still allowed to continue to teach at the school. And according to the guidelines by the Education Bureau, there is no way that any action can be taken against him. So my question for the Bureau Director is that as the head of the Education Bureau here in Hong Kong, and your Bureau has also investigated into the case, and you've also found out that some teachers have indeed caused harm to the students. And in fact, the school authorities have also referred those cases to the police. So do you think that these teachers should continue to teach in their posts? Do you think that is appropriate? Secretary. Thank you, President. Concerning the individual cases and the circumstances, I'm not going to comment on them here, but then as you have seen, well, the circumstances that the member referred to might happen. For example, in accordance with the procedures, once we learn about the incident, well, in some cases, the school authority or the school council would deal with that directly and proactively. But then in some cases, if we feel that the nature is very serious, then we would take the initiative to investigate into the case. And after investigation, we would also be making or writing to the authorities, asking them to take follow-up action within a specified timetable. And we think that the circumstances are getting more serious, then the Permanent Secretary can also appoint 3 personnel, including the professional council and the SWD, to go into the school to look into it. So we fully believe that students' interests should be protected and safeguarded, and also in dealing with that, we would also be talking to the Education Bureau in the district, and close communication would be kept. We also understand that under the Employment Ordinance, the SMC or the IMC are the authorities responsible for that. That's why there has been very close tripartite collaboration between the stakeholders. Thank you. Mr. Martin Liao, with regard to the alleged bullying and abuse case by teachers against students, well, I think prevention is better than cure. Well, under this CPC, I think there is a set of guidelines with regard to teachers, professional duties, and also the obligations of all the parties and so on. Yes, the scope of the guideline is very broad, but then there is no cause to enable the new teachers to fully grasp the content of the guideline. Well, the teachers play a very important role in teaching and educating students, and therefore they should have this sense of mission in educating our younger generation. So I'd like to know if the Bureau has any plans to introduce mandatory programs and workshops so that all educators will have a clear idea as to their obligations, and their sense of mission can also be enhanced. Secretary. Thank you, President. We are all very concerned about teachers and how they deal with such situations. As far as the Education Bureau is concerned, on a regular basis, we would organize diversified training program for the schools, including the promotion of a loving and care environment, and that would also help enhance the awareness of the teacher on anti-bullying and so on. We also have different programs, for example, the growth for primary school students and so on. During the past few years, we have also introduced this anti-bullying campaign, and over 200 schools have taken part and made use of teaching kits provided by the Education Bureau. Leaflets and posters have been used, and we have also organized day camps for ambassadors against bullying. We have also organized anti-bullying weeks and days in schools, and the Education Bureau has also organized regular workshops and seminars, and there should also be positive school environment. We should work closely with the police. We should also deal with physical and also psychological problems of students. We should also deal with school bullying, and we should also communicate effectively with parents and so on. And the Education Bureau has also appointed some tertiary institutions in organizing courses for teachers, and school bullying has become one of the mandatory elements for trainees, and in circumstances that might affect the students' interests, in accordance with the mechanism, we would also be notifying the relevant district-based unit in order to take follow-up action, and the school development officer and also the school psychiatrist would also be providing advice and assistance. Mr. James Tian. President, of course, I agree that overwhelming majority of schools and teachers are very hardworking, and they are very dedicated and professional. With regard to such bullying cases, there are only very few of them. But then in part C of the reply, yes, the Bureau Director said that out of 20, only 3 were substantiated in the past 4 years. So out of the 3 that have been substantiated, what the EBD was able to do was to take appropriate action, including issuing a warning or advisory letter to the teachers concerned. All right, if the case has been substantiated, then I would have thought that these are relatively serious, more serious cases. But then at best, you can only issue a warning or advisory letter to the teacher concerned. Would that be able to achieve a deterrent effect? So I'd like to know if the Bureau, all right, once a case has been substantiated, then the teacher concerned, for example, should be suspended from duties. It's not just about the school that he's working. So it's like a doctor, then he'll be suspended from practice. So is that, can that be done? Do you have that power? So for the 3 cases that have been substantiated, should he or should the teachers concerned have been suspended from teaching? Bureau Director, in the few cases that I just referred to, the measures that you refer to were implemented. Number 1, immediately we would contact the school concerned, and then the teacher would no longer be able to have contact with the students. So this is the first arrangement. And in the second situation, immediate written recommendation would be made to the school for follow-up action, including referring the case to the police as appropriate. And in the cases that we have, the school concerned would also report to the police direct. And thirdly, we would ask the school to take follow-up action. And at the same time, the Permanent Secretary for Education would be exercising his duties so that 3 professionals would be assigned to the school to help them implement these measures. With regard to the qualifications in question, we also have an objective mechanism in place. So even if we were to deregister the teacher concerned or to strike him off the list, there is an appeal mechanism in place, and in some isolated cases, these appeals might go all the way to the CEN Council. So we did have such cases in the past. So we do deal with such cases very seriously and solemnly. Thank you. Your question has not been answered. No, my question has not been answered. I was asking whether or not there has been any deregistration and so on. You said that some of the cases have gone all the way up to the CEN Council, but then I'd like to know if there has been any deregistration cases. Well, out of the dozen or so, 3 were pending, and one of them is actually in the final appeal stage. Mr. Leung Ka-ki, President, yesterday there was a parent of a seriously mentally handicapped student who came to me, and he said that very often when his daughter went home, she would have bruises on the body and so on. And on one occasion, even her fingers were bruised and swollen. And he filed a complaint against the school. And then he was told that after investigation, they couldn't find anything. So I'd like to know if that case might fall under the cases spelled out in para C. So is that one of the 20 cases? But then according to the Bureau Director, he has repeatedly said that appropriate follow-up action will be taken if such circumstances should arise, and then the teacher might be given a warning letter or an advisory letter, or he might also be deregistered, so to speak. So penalty is important, Mr. President, because once a siren is sounded, then other people should be alerted to that. But then, as Mr. Martin Liao just said, prevention is always better than cure. So my question for the Bureau Director is that in terms of prevention, will you be doing a bit more other than what you just said? Would you be reviewing the ratio between teachers and students, and also the workload for teachers, and also the manpower level of teachers and so on? So will there be more school social workers and professionals who will be able to assist the teachers in their work, and that would also ease the possibility of teachers or students being involved in unstable emotional states? Bureau Director, well, in the process, we have maintained regular direct contact with the schools concerned. President, last week I went to visit a school, and concerning a particular case, there was a general discussion, and according to the teachers, I was told that, well, yes, Bureau Director, we know that we have this duty to protect the students, but then as you can see, I also have bruises and injuries on my body, and therefore, well, Bureau Director, you must also have trust in us as professionals and also the school. We do deal with such cases very professionally, and concerning the case in question, the overall experience would also be shared through the district-based officers to other districts. I think this is the best way to deal with it. We should leave it to the school. It is best place to deal with that, and the Education Bureau would also provide resources and assistance to them, and that is something that we will be doing. your question has not been answered. No, absolutely not. My question for the Bureau Director is that for school bullying, well, that's because of the unstable psychological condition of the teachers and students. That's because the teachers' workload might be too much, and also because of a mismatch of resources and so on, and they might not get any support at all. So my question is, will you be reviewing the existing education mechanism, for example, the teacher-to-student ratio and also their workload, and whether or not there would be more professionals to help them? So this is a comprehensive review, but then the Bureau Director has not answered that at all. So will you be conducting a review? Yes, I can supplement on that. In fact, we've been reviewing the situation, including the fact that before 2016, we hope that all schools can have psychologist support. And for the other professional support, we will continue to make arrangements, and for moderate and also serious cases, we will deal with them accordingly. Mr. Raymond Chan. Thank you, President. Dr. Fernando Zhang's question, in part B of his question, he's asked if the authorities will make reference to the mechanisms regulating the conduct of professionals, such as the legal profession. We have the Bar Association and the Law Society. But then he said that before a consensus is fostered, the government is not in a position to set any timetable for that. In fact, during the first term of our government, CHEUNG already promised that he would consider setting up a teachers' professional council. And then in the second policy address, $20 million has been set aside for that. And I'm sure you will have no idea as to where the $20 million have gone. So have you conducted any consultation or survey? How many people are against it, and what are the reasons for going against this? Why is it that you have come to this conclusion that you're not going to set any timetable for the setting up of such a council? Bureau Director. In accepting the recommendation by the Education Bureau to set up this Professional Teachers Council, well, that was done in 1998, and in 1998, $20 million was set aside in a policy address for that purpose. And in 1999, after completing the consultation, well, in July, a press release was issued, and it says that, most of the submissions were in favor of the setting up of this Professional Teachers Council. But then with regard to the role of the Professional Teachers Council, the establishment, the constitution, and so on, there were divergent views on this. That's why in 1999, in the policy address, we said that we would be slowing down the pace for the setting up of this council so that the education sector will have more time to look at the functions and responsibilities of the council. That's why this is an advisory body, and in the interim, well, during the past 5 years or so, there have been many cases, and so far there has not been any case involving the council making any special decision on the disciplinary action against the teacher concerned. That's why we'll have to monitor the operation and experience of the council. It's already 2013 and 2014 is coming, and still you do not have the figures. So how can you say that there is no consensus at all? Will you continue to do it? Bureau Director, anything to add? As I said, well, in this regard, there have been a lot of exchanges, and we have been learning from the experience. As for the stakeholders, the professional teachers groups, and so on, they are moving in this direction, but then they are still of the view that they have not yet reached a consensus. And the most important thing is that that council can only be set up after a consensus has been fostered. We have spent more than 24 minutes on this already.
The third question, Dr. Leung Ka-lau. Thank you, Mr. President. It has been learned that there are currently quite a number of doctors' vacancies to be filled in the accident and emergency departments of public hospitals, and such shortage manpower has resulted in exceedingly long waiting time for A&E services. Patients triaged as semi-urgent and non-urgent. Some of these have had to wait for more than 20 hours. I have also learned that the Secretary for Food and Health has urged public and private sector doctors to participate in the scheme to work part-time in any department of public hospitals in order to alleviate the situation of manpower shortage. However, the hourly salary of part-time doctors in any departments at present is merely around 70% of the full-time doctors. In this connection, will the government inform this council whether it knows the respective average weekly working hours of full-time doctors of various ranks in A&E departments of public hospitals at present, as well as the respective median hourly salary, including basic salary and regular allowances of doctors of various ranks, calculated on the basis of the aforesaid working hours? B. the respective median hourly salary of part-time doctors of various ranks in A&E departments of public hospitals at present, as well as the criteria for determining the relevant salary level, and C, if the hospital authority conducted open recruitment of part-time doctors for A&E departments in the past 3 years. If so, when and how the recruitment was conducted, if not, the reasons for that. The Secretary for Food and Health. Mr. President, the manpower requirement for healthcare personnel grows in tandem with an aging population, advance in medical technology, and increasing demand for healthcare services in the community. In the past few years, the HA has always been concerned about manpower supply and implemented serious measures to address manpower issues. Recruiting a part-time doctor is certainly one of the measures. Furthermore, in 2013-14, the HA plans to recruit about 300 full-time doctors to meet service demand. The HA started recruitment of non-local doctors to practice with limited registration since 2012 as one of the additional and short-term measures to address the manpower problem. In addition, in recent years, the HA has created additional promotion posts, strengthened professional training, and relieved the workload of its frontline healthcare workers by re-engineering work process, streamlining procedures with a view to boosting staff morale and improving staff retention. Such measures have positive results, and the turnover rate of full-time doctors dropped from 5% in 2010-11 to 3.8% in 2013. Besides, the government has taken steps to tackle the healthcare manpower shortage problem at source by implementing a number of measures, including the allocation of additional $200 million for the triennial cycle starting from 2012 to increase the number of first-degree places in medicine by 10 to 420 per year. The HA expects to see an increase in total number of doctors when 320 and 420 medical graduates complete a internship in 2015-16 and 2018-19 respectively. The Medical Council of Hong Kong has decided to increase the number of licensing examinations from once to twice a year with a view to facilitating those overseas trained Hong Kong residents to return to practice in Hong Kong. At the same time, the HA enhanced the remuneration package of part-time doctors and allowed greater flexibility for their employment in early 2012 to increase the number of doctors in short term. Without affecting the promotion of other young doctors, HA has made efforts to retain some of the doctors who have retired or have left the HA. In 2012, there were about 60 doctors who retired or left HA who continued to serve in public hospitals on a part-time basis. As at the end of September 2012, there were 301 part-time doctors working at HA, of whom equivalent to about 117 full-time doctors, of whom 247 have retired or have left or have changed from full-time to part-time. My reply to various parts of the question is as follows. The conditioned work hours of doctors work in accident and emergency department of the HA are 44 gross per week. 44 hours gross per week. Hours of on-call duties not included. HA employs full-time staff on a monthly basis. Midpoint salary, basic salary according to notional annual midpoint salary, and monthly allowance and fixed rate honorarium of various ranks of full-time doctors as follows. One midpoint monthly basic salary for residents is $70,490, monthly allowance $17,330, fixed rate honorarium of A&E residents $4,750 per month. Number two, midpoint monthly basic salary of an associate consultant is $96,150, monthly allowance $33,119, fixed rate honorarium A&E associate consultants $4,750 per month. And three, midpoint salary basic salary of a consultant is $136,550, monthly allowance $47,047, fixed rate honorarium of A&E associate consultants is $2,750 per month. B. Since the implementation of new part-time employment scheme introduced in January 2011, there is no need for part-time doctors to take up on-call duties. Part-time doctors employed under the new scheme hence offered remunerations at 70% of those of full-time doctors of the same rank, including monthly salary based on the unified pay point and monthly allowance of the rank, and calculation is based on the number of service sessions. If the doctor concerned chooses to perform on-call duties on a part-time basis, the remuneration of such duties will be calculated according to that of a full-time doctor of the same rank who has similar qualification and experience, including monthly salary based on the salary point which is determined by relevant experience and rank, monthly allowance and fixed rate honorarium, and the calculation of salary per month is based on the number of service hours per week. C. The HA will recruit part-time doctors, including part-time doctors for A&E departments through open recruitment and through regular invitation by issuing letters to doctors who have retired, resigned for 3 months, and those who are about to leave the HA. The HA also recruits part-time doctors through other means of referral. From January 2011, when the HA has enhanced the part-time doctor scheme, to the end of September 2013, the number of part-time doctors in A&E departments increased from 8 to 30. Private doctors can apply to be HA part-time doctors through open recruitment, other means of referral, and self-nomination. The HA will continue to recruit full-time and part-time doctors for A&E departments through various means to meet operational needs. In the face of challenges posed by aging population, increasing demand for healthcare services, government has set up a high-level steering committee to conduct a strategic review of the healthcare manpower planning and professional development in Hong Kong. The review covers healthcare professionals from 13 professions, which are subject to statutory regulation. The steering committee will assess manpower needs in these healthcare professions and put forward recommendations on how to cope with the anticipated demand for healthcare manpower, strengthen professional training, and facilitate professional development, having regard to the findings of the strategic review with a view to ensuring the healthy and sustainable development of Hong Kong's healthcare system. Dr. LEUNG Ka-lau. Mr. President, I have asked a question in the I should not waste it in the supplementary question. I asked in the past 3 years whether there has been open recruitment, not what will be. According to his answer, it seems that there has not been open recruitment, and I have not seen any recruitment advertisement on HA website. So this is not in line with open recruitment requirement. My supplementary question is, for the doctors in A&E department, 44 gross hours, excluding on-call. But if on-call is included, then the total working hours are still 44 gross hours. In 2, 70% is because of no on-call duty. But this is not applicable to A&E doctors, because A&E doctors plus their gross hours plus on-call is still 44. Now they say that the part-time doctors don't need to take night shift. I talked to chiefs of A&E department. During night time, there are no part-time doctors, and that's the reason there are not enough doctors, and therefore patients have to wait for nearly 20 hours. Now, say a full-time doctor who works 44 hours per week, 8 hours night shift, and then 36 hours day shift, and the ratio is about 2.3 times day shift versus night shift. Will the administration consider enhancing the A&E department doctor part-time scheme? Different sessions will have different weights. Say daytime 2.3, or rather nighttime 2.3, and daytime 0.7. That will recruit part-time doctor, facilitate recruiting part-time doctors to do night shift. You have already asked your question. The Secretary. With regard to Mr. Leung's question, I'd like to answer in 2 parts. First, the HA, if the HA has to give different salaries for different sessions, say, for example, night shifts will be given a higher hourly rate for part-time doctors, not counselors, then the doctors of the HA have no choice whether he work only night shifts or only day shifts. If such a choice is provided, then the HA will be worried that there will be implications on incumbent full-time doctors. As for Dr. Leung's proposal on greater flexibility for different sessions, I think this has to be taken. This has to be considered together with the implications on full-time doctors. For full-time doctors, they cannot choose night shifts or day shifts. But if they become part-time doctors, they can choose shifts. And if a higher hourly rate is given to the night shifts, then there are implications. And if the negative impact is not too strong, we can talk to the HA to see if that can be considered. Ms. Albert Chan, now the deterioration of service of A&E department causes people to worry about their life. Now the problem is caused by inadequate number of doctors. A&E service is considered by doctors as something obnoxious, and they don't want to be posted to the A&E department. The administration was very brave in respect of importing foreign workers. Will the administration consider fully and then implement the permission of doctors who are trained overseas to work in Hong Kong? The administration cannot allow doctors trained within the Commonwealth to practice in Hong Kong. Now, will the administration relax the rules so as to allow those who are trained in the British Commonwealth to practice in Hong Kong? The Secretary. With regard to Mr. Chan's question, we have been considering various channels to facilitate overseas trained doctors to practice in Hong Kong. The present statutory mechanism requires all overseas trained doctors to pass a licensing examination in order to practice in Hong Kong. We have reached an agreement with the Medical Council, and starting from next year, the Medical Council will increase the number of licensing examinations from 1 to 2 next year. We also will continue to talk to the Medical Council to enable those who have passed the licensing examination to practice in Hong Kong, to facilitate their practice in Hong Kong. As for those trained in British Commonwealth, I think there is a problem with relaxing the arrangement. Now we should treat all overseas trained doctors equally. At present, the examination applies to all overseas trained doctors. If we just limited the exemption to doctors trained in a particular medical school, there are reservations towards that. But within the present framework, we'll try to facilitate the overseas trained doctors to practice in Hong Kong, in particular Hong Kong students who have studied overseas. We want to facilitate them to come back to Hong Kong to practice. Well, Albert Chan, well, I have a reason for changing law. For example, doctors trained under common law can practice in Hong Kong. You don't need to explain. Will he consider amending the law so that the law can be relaxed so that Hong Kong citizens' lives are protected during emergency? The Secretary. Frankly speaking, I have not considered the special point made by Mr. Albert Chan. I've already pointed out that if Mr. Chan refers to specifying, say, British Commonwealth countries or medical schools of certain British Commonwealth countries will be exempted from the licensing examination. That cannot be considered because the present arrangement treats everybody the same with regard to all those who are trained overseas. Mr. Wong Ting-kwong, I want to ask the administration, what are the qualifications of a doctor of the A&E department? Will these qualifications or conditions impede the HA from recruiting full-time and part-time doctors for the A&E department? If the answer is the affirmative, will the administration try to improve these conditions, improve the pay of the doctors so as to increase the number of doctors working in any department? The Secretary. I thank Mr. Wong for the question. With regard to a medical specialty, if one wants to be a specialist doctor, one has to fulfill certain conditions. At present, the Hong Kong Academy of Medicine, under the faculties of the Hong Kong Academy of Medicine, there are conditions requiring doctors to go through before they can pass the exams of the relevant specialty and then be recognized as a specialist doctor. As for doctors who serve in A&E departments, not everyone has reached the specialist level as required by the Academy of Medicine. Some are residents, some are interns who work in the A&E department. As for serving doctors in the A&E department, they focus their attention on caring for urgent patients. Under the present policy, with regard to the recruitment of part-time doctors, the part-time doctors are to deal with the waiting of the non-urgent patients. The requirements, therefore, are less stringent as those of a specialist doctor. Now, the public sector hospitals have suffered from shortage of doctors. That is not something that doesn't happen overnight. Dr. Leung mentioned that the part-time doctor only received 70% of the pay of a full-time doctor because they need to be on call. Now, since there is a shortage of manpower in public hospitals, and there is no significant improvement, even if there is the enhanced part-time doctor scheme, I therefore want to ask whether the HA will raise the salaries of part-time doctors so as to attract more part-time doctors to provide service. The Secretary. I thank Mr. Fan for the question. I think the question is similar to the one asked by Dr. Leung, or at least in the same direction. With regard to setting the salary of a part-time doctor, the HA makes reference to the salary of a full-time doctor. There is a discount because the full-time doctor has no choice. He has to be on call. In deciding on the salary, we try to make the salary more attractive. But if it becomes too attractive, then full-time doctors may find that their pay may not be as good as being part-time doctors. If that is the case, then it will cause a manpower problem for the HA. Under such a constraint, I still would like to talk to the HA to see if we can enhance the employment conditions to make make them more attractive. Mr. Ma Fung Kwok. Thank you, Mr. President. The question is on the shortage of doctors in a department, leading to long waiting hours. Apart from shortage of doctors, there are other factors contributing to the long waiting hours. Are there any shortage in other medical professions? With regard to training and manpower, are there any problem? There is a steering committee looking after that. With regard to other healthcare professions, what is the situation in terms of training and manpower? The Secretary. Thank you, President. With regard to aging population and other problems, there is increasing demand for healthcare services, in particular in the public sector hospitals. Generally speaking, the HA is facing manpower shortage not only in a single grade. There is shortage in other grades, but the issue of doctors has been singled out because, objectively speaking, the training cycle is 6 years plus 1 year of internship. The training cycle is very long. Even if the HA wants to enhance the number of trainees, it takes quite some time before the doctors can graduate and can help. In comparison with other healthcare professions, the cycle for doctors is longer. We've spent 22.5 minutes.
Question number 4, Mrs. Regina Yip. Thank you, Mr. President. According to the information on the website of the Education Bureau, the results of the central allocation of primary 1 places, as well as the results of the allocation of discretionary places and central allocation of secondary 1 places, allocation results for 2014-15 school year will be released on the 7th of June and 8th of July 2014 respectively, while those primary and secondary schools under the Direct Subsidy Scheme DSS will conduct their own admission exercises and determine when to release the results. It has been learned that DSS schools usually set the deadlines for admitted students to reply whether to accept the places ahead of the release dates of the allocation results, and those students who have accepted places of DSS schools will not be allocated government or aided school places. In this connection, will the government inform this council, A, whether it will consider advancing the release dates of the allocation results to dates earlier than the deadline set by DSS schools for students to reply whether they accept the places, so as to allow those students offered places by DSS schools and their parents to make choices between the places offered by DSS schools and those by government or aided schools, if not of the reasons for that. B. If the allocation results will not be released earlier, whether the authorities will consider increasing the ratio of discretionary places for schools and requiring the schools concerned to advance the release of the results of allocating such places, if not the reasons of that. And C. As there are views that the experience of teachers has direct impact on the school's attractiveness to gifted students, and there is a succession gap of teacher talents at present, whether the government will consider deferring the retirement ages of school principals and teachers to help those schools with enrollment difficulties to maintain their teaching quality so as to attract students to enroll in such schools, if not of the reasons for that. Secretary for Education. Mr. President. Now, on Mrs. Regina Yip's question, parts A and B of the question primarily suggest early announcement of the allocation results of public sector school places to facilitate parents' decision on whether to send their children to a direct subsidy scheme school or public sector school, an increase in the proportion of discretionary places DP. Below is a consolidated reply to both parts. We appreciate that some parents, on one hand, hope that they can have different types of schools to choose from, and on the other hand, are keen about their children having a greater chance of being admitted to their preferred school to suit the needs, aptitude, and abilities of their children. We also note schools wish to have more flexibility in admitting students according to their educational philosophy and characteristics, with steady and sustainable development to ensure the quality of teaching. The allocation mechanism, including the primary one admission POA system and secondary school places allocation SSPA system, aims to facilitate allocation of school places in an orderly manner. It has been the general consensus of stakeholders that we should not rely too heavily on academic results to assess students' ability or to select students for basic education. Premised on this, we have conducted a comprehensive review of the allocation mechanism. Having considered and balanced the views of different stakeholders, the prevailing detailed arrangements of the POA and SSPA have been implemented since 2005 and 2007, respectively. Under the POA, DP quota accounts for 50% of the places of a school. As regards the SSPA, to provide parents with more opportunities to directly select their preferred schools, the DP quota of a school has been increased from 20% to 30% since 2007. The number of schools that parents may apply for their children has also been increased to 2 at most. Besides, parents are required to indicate their order of preference to the EDB. Major stakeholders generally agree that the 30% DP quota and the DP application to 2 schools at most would strike the right balance in the light that parents and students are provided with more school choices, while schools are allowed greater discretion to admit students according to their educational philosophy and characteristics. In tandem, the aforesaid arrangements would alleviate schools' pressure arising from processing a substantial number of applicants. With the above arrangements, schools can also reserve most of their places for students in their school net during central allocation. Further, it would avoid aggravating the difference among schools in the utilization of the DP quota and the undesirable labeling effect so caused. DP admission results of the POA are released in end November each year. We have explored whether DP admission results of the SSPA can be released earlier. However, stakeholders having connection with primary schools are generally concerned about the impact of the early release of results on the overall learning atmosphere among P6 students and teachers' handling of different learning needs and expectations of students arising from those who have secured a place in the DP stage, while others have to await their central allocation results. The Secondary School Places Allocation Committee has had in-depth discussions of the issue from time to time. However, a consensus is yet to be reached due to diverse views. It should be appreciated that the school places allocation mechanism involves different stakeholders. Both primary and secondary schools have to handle, within a short span of time, a substantial number of applications and related matters, including school choice counseling, internal assessments, interview arrangements, etc., to ensure that the S1 places are allocated in a fair and equitable manner. Besides, DSS schools enjoy autonomy over admission of students, including the time for releasing admission results. Practically, there would be operational difficulties to ensure that the allocation results of P1 and S1 places could be released before the deadlines set by individual DSS schools for parents' acceptance of offer. Part C. No statistical evidence is available to show that there is a direct correlation between teachers' length of service and the school's attractiveness to gifted students. In general, schools are served by teachers of varying age and length of service. Under the Education Ordinance, except with a written permission of the Permanent Secretary for Education, a person employed as a teacher or the principal of an aided school shall not continue to be so employed in posts on the establishment for the school year or any part thereof, if he or she has attained the age of 60 years or more before the commencement of the school year. Furthermore, deferring the retirement ages of school principals and teachers will also affect employment opportunities of of prospective teachers. In fact, it is the responsibility of the School Management Committee or Incorporated Management Committee of aided schools to observe the relevant retirement age requirement and plan ahead for better human resources management, together with the development of a succession plan, including internal promotion or redeployment from other schools under the same school sponsoring body, and open recruitment so as to facilitate the healthy staff turnover. Except under very special circumstances, applications for extension of service normally will not be granted. Mrs. Regina Yip. Mr. President, just now Secretary talked about discretionary places for primary 1 places allocation. It will be released by the end of November, whereas for secondary schools, if the announcement is advanced, it will affect the learning atmosphere. But I want to point out that in other jurisdictions, they have similar arrangements. For example, in U.S., the universities have early admission. They admit students as early as in November. And for secondary schools in the U.S., some students might have received admission offers when they're in grade 11, so that in the second half of that school year, they are not required, or they don't have to face the pressure of university entrance admission examinations or admissions. But it doesn't mean that those students will lack incentive in their learning. So I don't think there is a need to worry about students lacking the incentive to go to school after they get offers. So will Secretary liaise with these schools again? Secretary. Thank you, Mr. President. Mrs. Yip made a very correct point, and that is the situation, but there are also problems when we exchange with schools. First of all, there is indeed a substantial number of applications. As for primary schools and secondary schools, the situation is different for students promoting from primary to secondary and those from secondary to universities. We don't want them to be subject to too much pressure. If we advance the announcement results for SPA, according to some school sponsoring bodies, 2 groups of students might be mixed in the same classroom. One group might have already completed the acceptance of admission offers, whereas for others, they still need to face pressure from admission examinations. And that's the picture at the moment, but I take note of members' comments, and I will continue discussing with the sector. Mr. Yip Kin-yun. Mr. President, one of the major objectives of establishing direct subsidy scheme schools is to provide parents with more choices. Some parents might prefer a number of DSS schools and then a number of government or aided schools. With this arrangement, DSS schools can advance their announcement of results, whilst at the same time students will need to give up their opportunities under the central allocation mechanism for public and aided schools. So does it mean that for parents' choices, in fact, they get fewer choices? Because originally they can choose among a certain number of schools, but now, because they need to make their choices in advance, their chance for government schools or aided schools might be reduced. So is it unfair for parents? Secretary. Thank you, Mr. President. Now, premised on the optimal utilization of resources to facilitate planning for the upcoming school years, students who have accepted offers from a DSS schools must not accept schools or places offered under the central allocation mechanism for public or aided schools. And there are, in the process, it's up to parents to choose. If the parents choose a DSS school, then of course the choice would be made at an earlier stage. And then the parents will need to make a choice between discretionary places and places under the central allocation mechanism, so as to avoid, of course, and there is a necessary pressure on students. And we think that this is the right balance struck. If the mechanism is changed, there might be more pressure on students in seeking school places. I'm not sure if my question has been answered. Now, he talks about parents' choices. Does it mean that there are restrictions on parents' choices and hence it's unfair on parents? I wonder if he has answered this question. Secretary, anything to supplement? As said in my main reply, in part A of the reply, parents on the one hand would like to have more choices. On the other hand, parents might also want to have a greater chance for their preferred schools, and they might need to focus on either the places offered by DSS schools or the government or aided schools. So first of all, parents are given the choices, and secondly, we must not give too much pressure on students by giving them too many choices. Ms. Sit Ho. Now, Secretary refer to the concern by school sponsoring bodies, because two groups of students with different situations might be mixed in the classroom, and that is the reason why you should synchronize the procedures. Some students might have been accepted by elite schools, some might have not, but it's part of education that students should accept that they have different circumstances. So, Secretary, some might question you for protecting the DSS schools, and that is why you would like to maintain status quo. Now, my question for the Secretary is, can you give us more reasons other than those stated in your reply that you are destroying the whole ecology of the education system just to protect the concerns, protect the primary schools, teachers? Secretary. As far as students are concerned, yes, they can choose either DSS schools or aided schools, and for DSS schools, they have their own characteristics and culture. They might opt for DSS schools for their freedom. However, they also face a risk of under-enrollment, and that is why the sector would like to finalize the places as early as possible so that they can plan ahead for steady development. Now, our understanding is that for DSS schools, they can also change the date of announcement of results. So we cannot make a direct comparison of the two mechanisms, or to mandate them to align the announcement date to the same date. Dr. Helena Wong, I think Secretary's reply is totally off the track. It's not sensible at all. Please refrain from making comments, Dr. Wong. Now, the question is whether you can arrange for the DSS announcement of placement result to be a date later than the date for central allocation mechanism, so that parents can be given more choices. The question is, parents come to complain with electrical members at the complaints office for for the administration's mismanagement of DSS schools, because parents would like to wait for the central allocation results first before they decide whether they should choose DSS or government or aided schools, and you're not safeguarding the rights of parents in as far as these choices are concerned. So, Secretary, do you think your responsibility is to protect the interests of individual DSS schools or to protect the rights of students and parents in choosing schools? Secretary. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Member, for your question. May I repeat? The objective of Hong Kong's education system is to provide a diversity of types of schools so that parents can choose one that suits their needs. And over the years, DSS schools have been providing alternative choices for students and parents, and it has been implemented and it is well established. And as said in the main reply, parents would like to have more choices as they may prefer some particular schools, and it's all about diversity of choices for students and parents, and this is our overall policy. Your question has been answered. He hasn't answered my question clearly. I am asking, in his opinion, as Secretary for Education, should he be protecting the students' and parents' choices or to protect the DSS, the interests of DSS schools? Dr. Wong, please be seated. Any supplement, Secretary? I reiterate, I understand the member's question. As a parent, I might want to have more choices. On the other hand, I might prefer to be admitted to one particular school. In Hong Kong, our advantage is that we give a diversity of choices, and in the process, the parents must make choices. Mrs. Yip. Another part of my question is on retirement age of school principals and teachers in government and aided schools. Now, the Secretary replied by saying that there is no evidence to suggest that the attractiveness of the schools to give the students have anything to do with the length of service of teachers. But indeed, there are views that it's difficult for schools to recruit quality teachers, and as far as the civil service is concerned, they are going to conduct a review on extending the retirement age for civil servants. So I'm asking Secretary whether at the same time they will conduct a review on the retirement age of school principals and teachers in aided schools. Secretary, this is a good question. I'm also a member of the Steering Committee on Population Policy, and I will there will be a review on retirement age of the working population as a whole. May I say some figures? Over the past few years, most of the time, only 1 or 2 or 3 teachers apply for extension of service. In 2011-2012, because of change of academic structure, 11 school principals applied for extension of service. As for teachers, the picture is more or less the same. In 2011 and 2012, 17 teachers applied for extension service. Otherwise, we received 0 applications over the past few years. I understand that they might want to, or that this might be the problem in the public sector as well as the private sector. That is how arrangements could be made for them to continue to make contributions. And this is a special arrangement.
Question 5, Dr. Elizabeth QUAT. Thank you, President. To achieve the reduction targets for pollutants emission by 2015 and those for carbon emission by 2020, to tie in with the gradual reduction in the use of the existing coal-fired generating units, and to meet the future demands for electricity, the government will review Hong Kong's fuel mix for electricity generation. Options available for consideration include increasing the use of natural gas, buying electricity from mainland power grid, and importing nuclear energy, etc. The government has planned to consult the public on the future fuel mix for electricity generation by the end of this year and indicated that in the relevant review, it will strike a proper balance among the energy policy objectives such as safety, reliability, affordability, and environmental protection. In this regard, will the government inform this council? A. Whether the authorities will expedite the formulation of a comprehensive energy policy of the targets of the fuel mix in the short, medium, and long terms which have been considered by the authorities when formulating the energy policy, as well as the timetable for implementing these targets. Whether the authorities have thoroughly considered or evaluated the impact of increasing the proportion of natural gas used on tariff and people's livelihood when they set the short-term target for the reduction in pollutant emission by 2015. In respect of setting the medium-term target for reduction in carbon emission by 2020, whether the authorities will make reference to Japan's recent announcement on lowering its latest target for reduction in carbon emission in response to the ever-changing environmental factors and considers conducting a corresponding review, if they will, of the details, if not the reasons for that. B. In determining the new fuel mix required for meeting the reduction targets for polluted emission and carbon emission, whether the authorities have drawn up any options, such as setting up a fund for stabilizing the price of natural gas fuel to ensure a stable supply of fuel for electricity generation and the electricity tariff at a reasonable level which is affordable to members of the public, if they have of the details of the options, if not the reasons for that. And with regard to the long-term plans for power grid development, whether the authorities will examine the different options for opening up the power grids and for power interconnection so as to tie with the objective of the future fuel mix, example, importing renewable energy from mainland by means of dedicated transmission lines, if they will, of the details, if not the reasons for that. Secretary for the Environment. At present, coal accounts for about 54% of Hong Kong's fuel mix for electricity generation, natural gas 23%, and nuclear energy imported from the mainland 23%. In order to reduce carbon emissions from power generation and to combat climate change, the government proposed in 2010 to improve our fuel mix for power generation in 2020 by substantially reducing the reliance on fossil fuels, which are highly carbon emitting, gradually retiring existing coal-fired generating units, and increasing the share of non-fossil, clean and low-carbon fuels, including importing more nuclear energy. While we were consolidating the views received during the public consultation exercise, the Fukushima nuclear incident took place as a result of the earthquake and tsunami hitting northeastern Japan. Various sectors in the community had expressed different views on the application of nuclear energy since then. After the incident, the mainland government immediately conducted a comprehensive safety check on nuclear facilities and suspended the approval of new nuclear projects, which was resumed only in end 2012. As the existing coal-fired generating units in Hong Kong will start to retire in the coming few years, and all electricity supply infrastructure requires long-term planning, we consider it necessary to review the future fuel mix for power generation in a timely manner in order to meet the future electricity supply demand of Hong Kong. We are conducting a review of the future fuel mix and are engaging various stakeholders, including experts, academics, industry and business sectors, and non-governmental organizations to solicit their views. We are working out the details of the public consultation, which we plan to launch shortly. As such, we could only give some in-principle responses to the questions raised by Dr. QUAT as follows. A. Each fuel source has its own merits and demerits. In reviewing the overall fuel mix, we will strive to strike a balance among the four energy policy objectives of safety, reliability, affordability, and environmental protection. With regard to environmental improvement, we understand that different countries would set their environmental protection targets having regard to their own circumstances. In a consultation document published in end 2010, the government proposed to set a target to reduce carbon intensity by 50 to 60% by 2020 as compared with the level in 2005. The government will review the carbon intensity reduction targets proposed in 2010 during the review of the fuel mix for power generation. In respect of air pollutants emission, as power generation is one of the major sources of air pollutants in Hong Kong, to achieve continuous improvement of the air quality, the power companies should continue to strive to reduce emissions. As such, we already issued in 2008, 2010 and 2012, respectively, 3 technical memorandum (TM) pursuant to the Air Pollution Control Ordinance Cap 311 to stipulate emission caps on 3 specified pollutants. The first TM specified emission caps for 2010 to 2014. The second TM tightened the emission caps for 2015 to 2016, and the third TM tightened the emission caps further with effect from the 1st of January 2017. One of the major initiatives adopted by the power companies to meet the specified emission caps was to increase the use of natural gas, which will add pressure to tariff increase. As the fuel market has been volatile and the tightened TM will only take effect in 2015, we considered it not appropriate to make any assumptions on the trend of fuel prices for assessment of tariff increase during the preparation of the relevant TM. The 2 power companies will submit their tariff adjustment proposals to the government pursuant to the Scheme of Control Agreements, SCAs. B. The reliability and price of energy supply are 2 important considerations for a review of the fuel mix. On energy supply, the Hong Kong SAR government signed a Memorandum of Understanding (MOU) on energy cooperation with the National Energy Administration of the Central People's Government in 2008 to ensure continuous supply of clean energy to Hong Kong for the next 2 decades. With efforts from all parties, the MOU is being implemented progressively. The agreement on the supply of nuclear electricity from Daya Bay Nuclear Power Station was renewed for a further term of 20 years until 2034. And the second West-East natural gas pipeline Hong Kong branch was completed in 2012 for off-taking natural gas for power generation in Hong Kong. In terms of price, regardless of the future fuel mix, replacement of coal by cleaner energy would inevitably add pressure to tariff increase. Hence, if we are to reduce greenhouse gas and air pollutant emissions and mitigate the impact of rising electricity bills for individual electricity consumers, the most fundamental way is to further promote territory-wide energy saving to reduce electricity demand. Energy efficiency and conservation has always been an important energy policy of the government. Regarding the proposal of setting up a fund for stabilizing the price of natural fuel gas, we consider it in essence a subsidy on electricity tariff by public money. It is not the most effective way of using public money, nor can it achieve the result of encouraging energy saving and reducing emissions. We have no plans to consider the proposal at this stage. C. In respect of the regulatory framework of the electricity market as stipulated in the current SCAs signed between the government and the 2 power companies, before implementing any changes to the regulatory regime, the government will take into account all relevant factors and discuss with the power companies market readiness, potential future changes to the electricity supply regulatory framework and transition issues before 2016. The midterm review of the SCAs just completed has provided a useful platform for us to listen to different views of the public and helped us plan the development of the electricity market after 2018. We will soon launch the public consultation on fuel mix for power generation and look forward to the active participation by the general public. The consensus forged on the future fuel mix will be an important basis for the review of the regulatory framework of the future electricity market. We are now proceeding with the preparatory work and will continue to maintain dialogues with various stakeholders. Thank you, President. Dr. Elizabeth QUAT, I don't think the Secretary has answered Part C of my question at all. That is whether there are long-term plans for power grid development and opening up the power grids and so on. Now, I think you should have answered my question. Of course, we want to make sure the approach is friendly to the environment. We don't want a tariff to go up too much. And we want to strike a proper balance. When we keep hearing this from the 2 power companies, if we are to meet the emission standards and we're to use cleaner fuel, definitely electricity tariff will go up substantially. We have to pay a price for going green. So in deciding on the future fuel mix, how are you going to strike the balance here? And are there any policies or bases to make sure that the 2 power companies will meet your fuel mix target by 2020, so that we could make sure the electricity generation is green. At the same time, there's no substantial increase in tariff. Secretary. Thank you, Dr. Quat, for your supplementary question. As I mentioned, we are now preparing the relevant consultation document. That's why today we could only make some in-principle responses. Dr. Quat asked some specific questions. These will be thoroughly considered, especially in the context of the public consultation on fuel mix. Now we'll look at various options. We'll do objective analysis. We'll look at the reliability, safety, the impact on tariff, and the impact on the environment. We'll do an objective analysis of all these factors, so that there could be an adequate and balanced discussion in the community. Well, Dr. Quat is right to point out that different fuel mix would have different impact. There are both pros and cons for each different sets of fuel mix, and that's why we're going to give a detailed and objective analysis to facilitate discussion in the community. We're not ruling out any options at this point, but we need some time to prepare detailed information for discussion by the public. Mr. Tang Ka-piu, thank you, President. The two power companies hire some 3,000 workers, including those of contractors. Whatever options we go for, by 2018, either we're going to use more nuclear energy, or we're going to buy electricity from the mainland. So I would expect locally generated electricity to go down in ratio from 70% to whatever percentage, I wouldn't know. So that would definitely drop the job prospects of local workers. So do you have any employment impact assessment? How do you plan to protect the jobs of workers if you have such an assessment? Secretary, I'd like to thank Mr. Tang for his question. President. Now, my understanding of Mr. Tang's question is that in future, when we have a different fuel mix, perhaps under some of the options, in the long run, there may be some impact on those in the trade. Well, this is a new point, because in the past, mainstream consideration of the energy policy has been on reliability, safety, impact on the environment, and impact on the community and households in terms of the tariff. So these have been the four main considerations all along. But now Mr. Tang is saying that maybe for some of the approaches, there will be less generation of electricity locally, and some jobs may not be kept. Now, I fully follow your point. We're now preparing the public consultation document. We've heard your views, and we'll see how we could respond to that too. Mr. Lee Chiak-yan, thank you, President. The government is going to launch a consultation on fuel mix, but I think the biggest issue really is about the monitoring mechanism that follows. If you just talk about the fuel mix but not the monitoring mechanism or the long-term development and planning, there's no point. Secretary, can you tell us you will take the two issues together in a discussion? We've been talking about it for a long time. During the Stephen Eaps days, we were talking about the interconnection of the power grid of the two power companies, but nothing came out of it. And there's no actually follow-up on that too. So on interconnection of the power grid between the two power companies, have you taken up discussion with the two power companies? Especially there is a lesser demand for electricity on the Hong Kong island, so would there would be more electricity supplied to CLP and in achieving the emission targets. Have you started discussion with the two power companies? What is the government position on interconnection of the power grid? Is that your position, really? Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Lee, for your question. And all along in the community, as we discuss the issue, we've been moving towards the long-term goal of opening up the electricity market. We are moving a step at a time towards that goal. And that's been the path we've been following all along. But then we're taking a gradual and orderly approach. First of all, the first step is a fuel mix, because the fuel mix may have an impact on the issues of concern to Mr. Lee Chun-yan. So that's the first step we're going to look at. That is the long-term direction, the community consensus. That's the first thing we have to look at. And then secondly, it would be the point made by Mr. Lee, that is by the end of 2015, we have to explore in depth that before the expiry of the agreements involving the two power companies, would there be any substantial changes? So the first step is to explore the fuel mix. The second step would be the point I just mentioned. And on what Mr. Lee Chun-yan said is that I think I've answered the question. Our long-term objective is to open up the market. But as to whether there will be interconnection of the power grid and whatever, I think perhaps the means don't really matter. I think what is important is what sort of system or options would best achieve the objectives of the four objectives of our energy policy, because reliability is important. We are a big city where there are many tall buildings, so reliability is important. So we have to make sure that there is a reliable and safe supply of power in Hong Kong. At the same time, we have to consider whether the tariff is reasonable and whether there's any adverse impact on the environment. So we have to take into account all four factors. So in response to Mr. Lee's question, yes, we're aware of such a viewpoint in the community. That's the direction we're going. But as the first step, we will be launching the public consultation document soon on fuel mix, because the issue of fuel mix will have an impact on the next step we take. That is, next step is about enhancing the current system and making changes. Thank you. Dr. Kenneth Chen. Thank you, President. I'd like to talk about a principle on energy policy, Secretary. In response to members' questions, you mentioned the Fukushima nuclear leak incident. Are you still going by the 2010 consultation document on Hong Kong's response to climate change? That is, nuclear energy is still considered safe and reliable, and you're still moving towards the target of importing 50% of our electricity by nuclear energy. Can you please let us know your position? And on the Fukushima incident, after that, what is your position? Secretary, I'd like to thank Dr. Kenneth Chen for his question about nuclear energy. After the Fukushima incident in Japan, in the region and around the world, there are now some different views on nuclear electricity. As I said, for our country, they have suspended construction of new nuclear facilities. It's only at the end of last year that approval was given for new nuclear projects. So in our fuel mix consultation, we'll definitely take on board this point. We're going to include the latest development in global discussion on the issue. Now, for the 2010 consultation document, Hong Kong's climate change strategy and action agenda consultation document is about reducing the reliance on coal from 54% to a much smaller percentage. Now, actually, the percentage will be like 50%, 40%, 10%. That's now the fuel mix. But how can we help the community discuss our energy policy in the light of the four objectives that I mentioned? And then we could come to a decision. We're still drafting the public consultation document on the fuel mix now, but Dr. Chen's question is, how do we look at the question of safety in relation to nuclear energy? Together with the relevant bureau, we're going to have a discussion. We believe we should keep an open mind in discussing the matter in the community, because different countries have reviewed the safety standards, and some countries have resumed approval of nuclear projects. And in Europe, like the UK and so on, they also have new perspectives now rising from their review is not that they have now excluded nuclear energy altogether. In Hong Kong, of course, we have to look at our own circumstances and we have to review the risks, and these points have to be brought out objectively in the consultation document. We shouldn't dodge such issues. He hasn't answered my question. I don't think I followed what the Secretary said. He was beating around the bush. So is it the case that in the past the government was absolutely positive about nuclear energy, but now perhaps it's a little bit more skeptical in handling the issue of nuclear energy? Could you state if that's the case? Secretary. President, we're still drafting the public consultation document. To answer your question in short, we should not rule out all possibilities. As I said, our country or some advanced countries in Europe, having reviewed the issue of nuclear energy, there will still be progress on development of nuclear energy, having met the safety standards. So for our country and other advanced countries in Europe, they have actually confirmed the use of nuclear energy. But of course, Hong Kong will have regard to our own circumstances and do our own assessment. Mr. Wu Chi-wai, thank you. President, in 2003, the government provided a document to LESCO. Now, if we are to go for interconnection of the power grid, the infrastructural construction would take 60 months. Now we are in 2013. And then in your reply, you say that by 2016, you will still have to consider whether there's market readiness before you would consider further interconnection. Does it mean that by 2018, in the new franchise agreements of the two power companies, interconnection would not be a part of it? Is that the case? Secretary. President, I'd like to thank Mr. Wu Chi-wai for his questions on the question on interconnection of the power grid. Now, we mentioned this earlier. When the two scheme of control agreements expire in 2018, how things will go? Well, I think in the next year or two, we'll have to explore the future direction for various possibilities, including interconnection of power grids. We're not going to rule out any possibilities at this stage, but of course, there are a lot of technical issues to consider, and there may be a long lead time involved too. But what is important is that we are now presented with two opportunities for us to fully understand the feasibility of different options in the light of the four principal objectives I mentioned. And then Mr. Wu Chi-wai mentioned interconnection. What are the technical possibilities and how might it impact on the four policy objectives? Well, we need to have adequate discussion in the community. It is only when the decision is made in the community before we could take things further. So we have to take it step by step. Mr. Wu, I know you are not entirely happy with the Secretary's reply, but we have spent some 24 minutes on this question, so perhaps you could pursue through other channels. Thank you.
Last question seeking oral reply. Dr. the Honorable KWOK Ka-ki. President, the third plenary session of the 18th Central Committee of the Communist Party of China, which was concluded on the 12th of this month, decided to establish a State Security Committee, or SSC. It has been reported that the purpose of establishing SSC is to improve China's mechanism and strategy for state security and to ensure national security. It has also been reported that members of SSC will include the heads of the Hong Kong and Macau Affairs Office of the State Council, HKMAO, and the Liaison Office of the Central People's Government in the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region. Regarding the impact of the SSC on the work of the Government of Hong Kong, will the government inform this Council? A. When and through which channel it first learned of the decision to establish SSC? Whether the police and the Department of Justice will revise the existing law enforcement and prosecution policies in response to the purpose of SSC, if they will, of the details. Whether the government will restart the work of enacting local legislation to implement Article 23 of the Basic Law, if it will, of the timetable and details. B. Whether it has assessed if, upon the establishment of SSC, there will be corresponding changes in the roles played by Hong Kong MAO and Liaison Office in handling matters related to the relationship between the central authorities and the Hong Kong SAR in accordance with the Basic Law. If there will be changes of the details, whether it is studied if there is a legal basis for Hong Kong MAO and Liaison Office to carry out tasks in Hong Kong in furtherance of its purpose of SSC, and if there is a legal basis of the details. And C, as Article 22 of the Basic Law stipulates that all personnel of the departments of the central government shall abide by the laws of the Hong Kong SAR, whether the government has made inquiries with the central authorities to see if SSC personnel will carry out activities in Hong Kong, including handling matters related to the Occupy Central movement, in order to ensure that they abide by the laws of Hong Kong SAR if they will carry out activities of the legal basis, and whether the authorities have assessed if such a practice will violate the policy of one country, two systems and the principle of Hong Kong people ruling Hong Kong and a high degree of autonomy being implemented in Hong Kong. Secretary for Security.
President, since the establishment of the Hong Kong SAR, the central authorities have been acting strictly in accordance with the fundamental policies of one country, two systems, Hong Kong people ruling Hong Kong, and a high degree of autonomy, and the provisions of the Basic Law in supporting the Chief Executive and the Hong Kong SAR government in administering Hong Kong in accordance with the law, with a view to maintaining the prosperity and stability of Hong Kong. We note that the third plenary session of the 18th Central Committee of the Communist Party of China, or CCCPC, held earlier, announced establishment of the National Security Commission, or the NSC. Since information about the NSC available is very limited, the Hong Kong SAR government will not comment on speculations or reports that are not based on facts. The administration's reply to the various parts of Dr. KWOK Ka-ki's question is as follows. A. The central government and the SAR government have all along been acting strictly in accordance with the Basic Law. Article 14 of the Basic Law provides that the government of the Hong Kong SAR shall be responsible for the maintenance of public order in the region. The third plenary session of the 18th CCCPC is to deal with matters of national level and should not be confused with internal security, which is the responsibility of the Hong Kong SAR according to the law. Hong Kong is ruled by law. The police will continue to take enforcement action in a fair, just, and impartial manner in accordance with the laws of Hong Kong so as to maintain public order and public security of Hong Kong. Regarding criminal prosecution, Article 63 of the Basic Law provides that the Department of Justice shall control criminal prosecutions free from any interference. That constitutional guarantee of independence ensures that prosecutors within the department may act independently according to the law without any political or other undue influence. There has not been any change to the current term of the Hong Kong SAR government stance on the legislative exercise of Basic Law Article 23. The Hong Kong SAR has a constitutional duty to enact laws in accordance with Basic Law 23 to protect national security. However, the current priorities of the government are social and livelihood issues. The administration understands the community's concerns over the Article 23 legislative exercise. When the legislative exercise is to be taken forward, the Hong Kong SAR government will fully consult the community in order to achieve a broad-based consensus on the legislative proposals. Any legislative proposals to be drawn up will be consistent with the relevant provisions of the Basic Law and the relevant international conventions protecting our various rights and freedoms. My answer to parts B and C of the question. Article 22 of the Basic Law provides that no department of the Central People's Government and no province, autonomous region or municipality directly under the central government may interfere in affairs which the Hong Kong SAR administers on
own in accordance with this law. If there is a need for departments of the central government or for provinces, autonomous regions, or municipalities directly under the central government to set up offices in the Hong Kong SAR, they must obtain the consent of the government of the region and the approval of the Central People's Government. All offices set up in the Hong Kong SAR by departments of the central government or by provincials, autonomous regions, or municipalities directly under the central government, and the personnel of these offices shall abide by the laws of the region. The above provision of the Basic Law states clearly that the central government officers and the personnel shall abide by the laws of the SAR. Hong Kong is ruled by the law, and everyone is equal before the law. In fact, the CG officers and their personnel have been exemplary in abiding by the laws of the SAR. The Hong Kong SAR government has all along been maintaining connections with the central authorities and other mainland departments in accordance with the Basic Law and the principle of one country, two systems, and is required to contact or communicate with relevant officials from time to time. The law enforcement authorities of the Hong Kong SAR and the mainland respect each other's jurisdictions. Neither of them is subordinate to the other. Neither of them interferes in the jurisdiction of the other. Under no circumstances can law enforcement officers take enforcement action in the territory of the other, and law enforcement can only be taken by law enforcement authorities of that territory in accordance with the local law. The administration respects the freedom and right of possession and peaceful assembly enjoyed by Hong Kong residents under the Basic Law and the Hong Kong Bill of Rights Ordinance. The administration is concerned about Occupy Central initiated by some members of the community and a possible illegal acts associated. There are also concerns from other organizations and individuals over the impact of Occupy Central on the community. President, I have to reiterate that when expressing their aspirations, participants of public meetings, demonstrations, or processions should, under the premise of observing the laws of Hong Kong, conduct such activities in a peaceful and orderly manner without breaching public order or adopting any acts of violence. The police will formulate and take appropriate measures to facilitate the smooth conduct of lawful and peaceful public meetings and processions on the one hand, and while on the other, minimizing the impact of such events on members of the public and road users, as well as ensuring public order and public safety. Thank you. Dr. KWOK Ka-ki. President, I don't know whether the secretary is from Mars. The secretary claims that the SARG would act in accordance with the laws of Hong Kong, but can we remember that core security zone when Premier Li Keqiang visited Hong Kong, and when we had that debate last year, some officers of the liaison office called legislators challenging Article 22 of the Basic Law. So according to the paper, the NSC will ensure national security. I'd like to ask whether the government would, on the basis of this principle, allow personnel of NSC to blatantly or covertly interfere with the governance of this government. As you can see, they've been smearing Occupy Central to turn it into an illegal activity, and then they can use that as an excuse to enact Article 23 of the Basic Law. Thank you. Secretary for Security, I disagree with Dr. KWOK. Every word I said in my main reply is a fact with legal basis. Article 22 of the Basic Law has set out very clear that there is mutual respect between the law enforcement authorities of Hong Kong SAR and the mainland authorities. There will be no cross-boundary enforcement action. Regardless of where they are from, people from the mainland have to abide by the law of Hong Kong. And Dr. KWOK referred to the licensing issue of free TV. I remember correctly that SCMA, in answering a similar question earlier, made a reply to such matters, and I will not repeat his comments. Thank you. Mr. Christopher Chung. Thank you. Well, if you have done nothing wrong, you can have a clear conscience. Well, why do you have to so worried about the establishment of the NSC? Have you done a lot of things to harm the country? Hong Kong is part of China. Earlier on, there were a U.S. spy, Snowden in Hong Kong, revealing that the U.S. government were illegally intercepting communications in Hong Kong of the Chinese authority. So can we ensure that there will be no foreign powers or their agents sacrificing the interests of Hong Kong, and how can they ensure that there will be no compromise to the interests of Hong Kong? Secretary, the SAR will ensure the internal security of Hong Kong in accordance with the basic law. All along, this has been the responsibility of our disciplined forces. For instance, on anti-terrorism, we have contacts with overseas jurisdictions and exchange intelligence. Whether there is establishment of the NSC or not, we'll do our utmost to ensure the law and order and internal security of Hong Kong. Our disciplined forces are committed and are competent and experienced enough to do a good job in this regard. Mr. James To, President, some colleagues advocate rather radical ideas. And according to the Secretary, limited information is available on NSC. Still, can the Secretary ensure or guarantee that the NSC will not play any role in the vetting of candidates of the coming CE elections? Because according to Mr. Li Fei, the central authorities will not accept anyone who is against the central authorities to be the CE. So will NSC play any role in the vetting of future candidates? President, we have noted media reports and various speculations on the establishment of the NSC. However, no facts were advanced in such comments and reports, and therefore we're not going to comment on such reports. Mr. James To asked about our constitutional reform. According to information we have, I don't see how the establishment of NSC will have any impact on such matters. Mr. Lam Tai-fei, well, our country is getting stronger and stronger, and this has led to the jealousy of many foreign powers, the worry that China would overtake them, and they're doing different things, creating obstacles for the advancement of the country, creating diversion, polarizations. Hong Kong is part of Hong Kong. Well, I think it is but natural that we should be protected by the nation. If the work of NSC doesn't cover Hong Kong, then I'm very worried. We are to be left like orphans. So somebody associated NSC with the Occupy Central Movement and C election, I think they've thought too much of themselves. All right, I'd like to ask the Secretary, do you know whether the scope of work of NSC is related to the security of Hong Kong? Please let us know more so that we can have a greater sense of security. Secretary, let me quote from the Xinhua Net on what President Xi said in the third plenary session of the 18th CCCPC. According to the quote, the purpose of the MPC is to promote policies and strategy for state community for security and to study major issues on national stability. I think it is common for governments to set up NSC, and it is certainly not a novelty. regarding our internal security and law and order. From the Security Bureau's point of view, under Article 14 of the Basic Law, these are responsibilities of the Hong Kong SAR. We have got a comprehensive set of laws and judicial system. The government and also its citizens will act in accordance with the law. And to a certain extent, this has protected the rule of law, stability, and prosperity of the city. Of course, we understand that this is not easy to come by. We have good law and order in Hong Kong. We will remain vigilant and will maintain liaison with other enforcement agencies of other jurisdictions and assess our circumstances. Our disciplines forces are responsible for our internal security. I have every confidence in them, and they are certainly capable of taking decisive actions to ensure law and order in Hong Kong and ensure security in Hong Kong. And our police force will continue to act in a fair, just, and impartial manner in maintaining good law of order and also internal security in Hong Kong. I am sure this is Mr. Lam. What is your question? Obviously, he has not answered my question. Can you repeat your question? My question is, as far as the Secretary knows or as far as he is informed, how much of the work of NSC will involve the security of Hong Kong? Mr. Lam, Secretary, Mr. Lam would like to know the work of NSC, but not the work of our local law enforcement agencies. Thank you. As I said in my main reply, we don't have a lot of information on NSC now, but I can say this to the honorable member. According to the basic law, we're able to deal with our own matters. Thank you. So members can rest assured. Mr. Hon KWOK, well, as the Chinese saying goes, people like to blow their own trumpet. And in Hong Kong, there are people who think too much of themselves. NSC is a national policy, and they think that NSC is established to deal with Hong Kong. And some members asked whether NSC would take action against the Occupy Central movement. And then the Secretary took that question seriously. I'd like to ask the Secretary for Security, is it his assessment that the Occupy Central movement would threaten national security to the extent that NSC is going to deal with that movement? Secretary. Well, I mentioned Occupy Central because it was mentioned in part of the member's question. So based on that, I provided a reply. The internal security of Hong Kong is the responsibility of our police force. We are absolutely capable and are confident that we can deal with any internal matters of Hong Kong. So we absolutely need not to ask any force outside Hong Kong to help us. We can certainly tackle it ourselves. There are concerns in community about the Occupy Central movement, and I also agree with Mr. Wong. This has nothing to do with the subject of the main reply. Thank you. Mr. Lee Chuk-yan. According to Mr. Christopher Chung, if you have done no wrong in your life, you can rest with a clear conscience. So why is presidency so worried? He is worried about his own nationals. And I think Mr. Lam Tai-fai is eager to have Hong Kong included in the work of NSC. I'd like to ask the security Secretary for Security. It said that with NSC, we don't have to enact legislation to implement Article 23, and yet NSC will enforce national security in Hong Kong, and will that make Mr. Lam Tai-fai more comfortable, even though we haven't enacted legislation according to Article 23? We have the security here. Unfortunately, the Secretary has not been able to answer Mr. Lam Tai-fai's question. Perhaps he has no answer to that. My question is, since there are representatives in the Hong Kong MAO and liaison office in the NSC, is the Secretary aware of that? That being the case, does that mean that their rules and regulations will be imposed on Hong Kong? Now, if you don't know now, by the time you know it, perhaps it will be too late. Can you allow the Secretary to answer? Mr. Lee Chuk-yan has made a lot of comments, and he said that it's reported that the NSC has got personnel from the Hong Kong MAO and the liaison office. Now, this was reported by one newspaper in Hong Kong. It said that according to reports, it is reported that this and that, okay? I'd like to say first, we will not comment on such matters. Secondly, that report did not contain any facts. So we believe that the report has been hypothetical in nature, or is only speculating. Regarding the government's position on Article 23, I have stated a position very clearly in my main reply, and I'm not going to repeat that. President, my questions have been answered. I asked whether the liaison office and Hong Kong and Macau office are represented in NSC or not. No, you did not. You did not raise that question directly. Secretary, would you reply as to whether the two organizations are represented in the NSC? President, information on the NSC is very limited, and therefore we're not going to comment on speculations or reports that are not based on facts. We've spent more than 23 minutes on this question. That's the end of our oral question.